Hello there. What is going on, everyone? It's time for a stud or dud video for Star Wars Armada. We're going to be looking at one of the most interesting and probably one of my favorite cards to look at, although not always to equip. It's the cluster bombs, and we're going to be asking the question to you guys: is it a stud or is it a dud? It's kind of a short-running series that I have that I'll basically look at a card and kind of weigh the pros and cons. This is usually a space reserved for cards that aren't particularly on top of the meta. They're not super popular cards. They're cards that maybe are in your collection that you will pass over and not really give a second look to. Cards that are seldom taken and seldom celebrated. And I like to ask the question, how can it work? Is it worth you taking a second look at or not? And can it be a stud or is it a dud? If you guys are new here to the channel, I do talk a lot about Star Wars Armada and other Star Wars and tabletop games. If you're interested, I'd love to have you stick around. We are doing a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway right now. There's still just a little bit of time left to enter to win that. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. I usually announce winners towards the end. Links for all kinds of social media, our Discord, and other stuff like that are down in the video description below. Plus that also Armada AI system if you're interested in checking that out. All over on Crabbok.com. So let's talk about cluster bombs. This is it's a defensive retrofit already. It's already got negative points going up against it because it's in a very popular slot that is highly contested. So cluster bombs are a 5-point defensive retrofit. They are not a modification, so they were not going to interfere with a lot of that. It does say, after a squadron performs an attack against you, even if you are destroyed, you may discard this card to roll 4 blue dice. That squadron suffers a damage for each hit or crit icon rolled. So basically, on average, you're going to do 3 damage to a squadron that's attacking you. That's the typical on average. Honestly, this card is usually overlooked because it's a one-time. You're discarding the card. It's expendable. It's once per game. You use it, and it's gone. May not kill the squadron. On the plus side, it's a defensive retrofit that does damage, so that's kind of cool. This one came out initially with the MC80, the Home 1, and really, I don't think I ever really saw a moment of greatness. I don't ever think it really got taken very much. In the early days of Armada, it only came in the Home 1, which was already an expensive ship, and most people didn't want too many Home 1s in their collection, so people were never able to really spam it. Considering it's a defensive retrofit, Rebel players, didn't really need that many Home 1s. Imperial players weren't really, buying across the aisle too much just to get a lackluster card. So it wasn't everywhere. Didn't show up in a lot of lists. It's got its pros and cons, though. So I want to talk about the obvious pro here first, in that this can help mitigate squadrons. If you like to run squadronless, or if you like to run fairly light on the squadrons, or without any squadrons at all, this is something that you can think about. It is a way to do damage to squadrons that attack you, even if you are destroyed. I like the even if you are destroyed part. I think that's a good thing. I think it's also a great way to get around scatter and brace and any kind of reroll shenanigans with all the evades that some of the new squadrons have now, and Jedi that can force you to reroll dice when you're attacking and stuff, because this is not an attack. This is an effect that happens after a squadron attacks you. And that's pretty cool. This could be a disincentive for those ace squadrons to attack you. The problem is you caps out at 4 damage, and there are a lot of, strong, nasty bombing aces that will be attacking your ships that have a lot more than 4 health. Typically, you're probably only going to roll on 3 on this, on the average. For if you're looking at crits and hits, you got 2 accuracies on the blue dice, or 2 out of 8 chance of not getting any damage through on a die. So quarter chance, so you're going to get probably 3. Now, getting past scatter aces can be a pretty good thing. There are plenty of really nasty, hard to kill aces that 4 damage, 3 or 4 damage could potentially kill, and it would be very, very nice to have ways to deal with them. However, your opponent might very well just say, no, these guys won't. These guys are just here to attack your squadrons and to deal with your squadrons. And now, if your squadrons are dead or you didn't have any squadrons, that's no problem. I'll just have my higher HP squadrons attack you. I might have my generic TIE fighters attack you. Wait for you to pop your squadron, wait for you to pop everything. Then, once it's gone, then you can use it. It also happens to fit into the defensive retrofit category, which is a highly contested category. Look, it's not the most expensive defensive retrofit out there. It's on the cheaper side, but it's actually not the cheapest. And that's kind of where I think it's gotten worse. I've talked about this card years ago. I haven't talked about it in a long time. But since then, we've seen a lot of changes to the game. We've seen a lot of new cards come out, and maybe even a degree of power creep. And cluster bombs is not even the cheapest. Most ships now, if they're just trying to get a cheap defensive retrofit, a lot of ships will opt to go with either reinforced blast doors or reactive gunnery. And then that's, those are definitely 2 that are going to do well. And Clone War ships are going to obviously go for thermal shields because 5 points versus 5 points. Thermal shields is incredible. And cluster bombs is only a one time. It can only use it once. And that's its biggest weakness. I feel like if cluster bombs were, you could use it more than once, even if it were a weakened state, it'd be a lot better. But then there are things that can give you counter that could stack with that as well. So, but I like the fact that it's automatic damage, and that a scatter ace won't be able to use defensive tokens to mitigate that damage. It can potentially take out a squadron all at once if they have 4 or less health. And so that's certainly something to be thought about. But here's the other thing. And this is another point that is definitely a bad point on this card. It's that, okay, if you want to run it, you're going to have to run it on everything in your whole fleet. Right, so if I've got a Venator, and Empire has, and Venator is a good anti-squadron ship for the Empire. The Empire's version of a Venator 2, ordnance experts, cluster bombs, flechette torpedoes, ordnance pods, linked turbo laser towers. All of these are going to really work well against squadrons. Linked turbo laser towers is just a good upgrade all around. Can give you 2 extra dice when you're attacking a big squadron. Ordnance pods gives you a whole extra squadron attack after you're done. Flechette torpedoes allows you to spend one of those hits to just toggle the squadron, so it can just turn squadrons off. Of course, cluster bombs and ordnance experts for the rerolls. And the thing is, you'd have to have cluster bombs on. You kind of want it on every ship in your fleet, because the idea is your opponent's going to know that you have that. They can either send the weak squadrons in first that can afford it, and then, now that you've popped it, now we come in and hit you with everything. Or we just go to the ship that doesn't have cluster bombs. And that's a problem, because some of the Empires, in case of the Empire, for example, some of their best anti-squadron ships don't have the defensive retrofit. And so, then you're like, okay, well, maybe I want to run multiple raiders. Well, I could put Minister Tua on one and then put it on there. You have that option, but that only works for one of them. Or multiple anti-squadron raider titles, and a lot of anti-squadron shenanigans you could run. But still, it also has the added weakness of the fact that you might end up facing somebody that's not running any squadrons, or only has like a screen of like TIE fighters that just don't care. And there you go. Or you could end up rolling 4 accuracies and it does nothing at all. Or maybe even worst case scenario, you get that squadron ace, you get that Sienna Ree, and you roll 2 hits, and then you never actually are able to kill her again, and she just flies away onto the station. So, I say that's worst case scenario because you'll feel so close, but actually be so far. But all of that being said, I think it'd be really fun to be able to try to run, to try to run cluster bombs. I think it would be a surprise, and that certainly counts for a lot to surprise somebody. Like, I've got this cluster bomb list. That's the problem. Is I feel like that sort of thing has already been done and done better by point defense ion cannons. It's an ion cannon that is way better against squadrons than cluster bombs is. And it's cheaper. It's only 4 points, with the only restriction that it can't go on a huge ship. And, huge ships don't have defensive retrofits either, so there's really no trade-off. There's no opportunity cost there. It's just, and it works every single time you're attacked. So you can force a reroll every single time with point defense ion cannons. Completely, granted, yes, it could potentially work together with cluster bombs, but still, this works every time, and it's cheaper. It's just there's no contest. Cluster bombs has been shut down. Now, if I will say that if cluster bombs ends up being cheaper, then it might be worth revisiting. It might be a little bit more doable, and that's certainly an option. Now, where does cluster bombs actually, at least possibly, have some real use right now? I think it's with the Republic. The Republic doesn't have ion cannon slots right now. If you're looking for, somebody who's trying to think about, some kind of jank list that they can't just run, the point defense ion cannons, look to the Republic, because they don't have ion cannon slots, and they do happen to have every version of their ships. Every ship has at least one version that has defensive retrofit. So it may be an Anakin Skywalker list, or some kind of multi-ship list that doesn't feel like running squadrons. It's something that you could toy around with and find a place to make it work. Still, it's a little overcosted for being a one-time per game ability, especially when you've got like Darth Vader Officer. That's an incredible guy that's only 1 point and stuff like that. So I feel like while the Republic gives you an opportunity to try this out, don't get your hopes up. Probably not going to be great. You could end up rolling unfavorable results, and once you do it, then you're wide open target for attack. Or also you could end up facing somebody who's not running squadrons to begin with, and then you'd have been better off with virtually any other defensive retrofit. So that's definitely something to think about. So what is the verdict on cluster bombs? Ultimately, we ask the question, stud or dud. I'm going to give it a thumbs down. This one's still a dud. If it were cheaper, if we do see a points rebalance, this one could... I don't know if it would ever rise to the stud level, but if it ended up being 1 point, it might be. It might be. It could be something that maybe you put on a CR90, 1 or 2 points. I could see this being a good, or at least, if it were cheaper, I could see it being a good defensive retrofit option for small ships that have defensive retrofits, for those Architons and those CR90s, to put something in that slot, makes their cost go up a little bit, but not so bad, and gives them some defense from being picked off by bombers, by scatter aces, and things like that. Especially since there are some small ships that can do decent flak. Even if you've got like 5 or 6 health, you might think twice. I'm like, wait, because if you flak me and then a cluster bomb could wipe me out. So it's something that's worth thinking about. If it were to come down in points, but I think it would have to come down quite a bit. I think 1 or 2 point reduction in here wouldn't be enough. I think it needs to come down 3 or even 4 points to be worthwhile. I don't see it ever going down to be a 0 point upgrade, because then it'd be an auto include, and then that would be broken. Then it would be an absolute stud if it was a free upgrade. But if it was 1 or 2 points for a one-time per use game, I could see it getting taken more. My honest prediction is that I don't think it would come down to 1 point, but I could see this one coming down to 2 points. I think 2 points is possible, and it would still probably be good there. But I don't know if it'll actually make it down that low. But we'll have to wait and see. All right, guys, that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you think about cluster bombs. Do you think it's a stud? Do you think it's a dud? What points do you think it would be appropriately costed at if we were to see this one get rebalanced? Let me know down in the comment section. I'll talk to you guys later. I want to thank my patrons. You guys are out of this world and help make this whole channel possible. Thank you so much. If you're interested in getting your name in the credits and checking out Patreon, we have links in the video description below. Thank you so much for watching. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes, and always wash your socks.